2005, director Greg McLean released an Australian horror film, The Wolf Creek. Wolf Creek is a sadistic and gore-filled horror film that is brutally violent and unwaveringly realistic. The movie is about three backpackers, Christy, Ben, and Liz, who are traveling across the Australian outback. The journey they are aiming for is traveling through the Wolf Creek National Forest, but they run into some trouble when their car dies. When they meet a friendly local named Mick Taylor,
"What the bloody hell are you mob doing out here? Scared the shit out of me."
who offers them help to get where they need to go. They think their luck has turned around, but it is actually the start of their worst nightmares. The torture-heavy horror film is one that boasts a true story in its opening credits. But what's the real story behind it? Who was the inspiration behind Mick Taylor in the film? The director combined the gruesome crimes of Australia's notorious serial killers Bradley Murdoch and Ivan Milat to create one ultimate serial killer villain that made audiences squirm in their seats. Milat himself is known as one of the most notorious serial killers in Australian history. In 2001, two backpackers, Peter Falcone and Joanne Lees, were traveling on Stewart Highway towards Darwin. When they reached the Barrow Creek, a mechanic named Bradley Murdoch managed to get them to pull over because he had convinced them that there were sparks coming from the exhaust of their van and that they needed to service it immediately. After getting Peter to get out of the car, Murdoch had Joanne rev the engine to cover up the sound Murdoch shooting Peter. From there, Murdoch approached Joanne's window holding the gun. He tied her up and dragged her into his truck while he disposed of Peter's body. Joanne was able to escape while Peter was preoccupied, and she hid in some bushes in the outback. Murdoch searched for her for hours, but eventually gave up.
Hide and seek, is it?
When she was certain he was gone, she staggered back to the highway to get help. She was discovered by two truck drivers and was able to lead police officers to Murdoch after they found his DNA on the ties he used to restrain her with. Bradley Murdoch was found guilty in December 2005 and is serving life in prison. Peter's body has still never been found. Murdoch's approach is similar to Mick Taylor in the movie in that he also approaches the tourists under the guise of car trouble and offers a hand. While Murdoch's incident was isolated to just attacking Peter and Joanne, he was known for being a drug runner and a heavy amphetamine user. Ivan Milat was a serial killer who killed at least 7 tourists between 1989 and 1993. These killings became known as the backpack killings. His murders took place in the Belanglo State Forest in the southern part of Australia. The first victims that were found of his were 2 women backpacking from Europe and were named Joanne Walters and Caroline Clark. The bodies of these 2 women were found in Belanglo. Walters was found by hikers in a shallow grave and had been stabbed 14 times. Clark was found a day after Walters and had been shot, presumably being used as target practice by Milat. In 1993, a year after Clark and Walters had been found, a human skull was found by police. This human skull led them to being able to find Deborah Everest and James Gibson, who had gone missing in 1989.
Where did he say his place was again?
South.
In 1991, German backpackers Anja Habscheid, Gabor Neugebauer, and Simone Schmidl were the next bodies to be found. Habscheid was also found in a shallow grave with multiple stab wounds, as well as being decapitated. Neugebauer had been shot in the head, and Schmidl was also stabbed to death, but was not buried like her friends. Paul Onions was an Englishman who had narrowly escaped a sadistic killer in 1993, and had a similar story to the killings of the individuals mentioned previously. Onions was the man who was able to identify Milat as his attacker and link the other murders together to convict him. He was found guilty in 1996 and just died in prison in 2019 after spending 20 years in and still not confessing to any of the crimes he committed. While McLean upped the ante a bit more with the sadistic killings we see in the movie.
Fucking parts out of your car, right? Now the boss, everything's all burnt. What do you think of that?
Such as Ben being nailed to wooden boards crucifixion style. The guts of the story remain to be equally disturbing. He even gets down the general style and aesthetic of Milat in the rough and rugged-looking man of the outback. He carries the same base of story in the sequel, Wolf Creek 2, when Taylor encounters German backpackers as well as a character named Paul Hammersmith, who escapes his clutches, just like Paul Onions did with Malat. Mick Taylor is insane and creepy enough to invoke fear in anyone watching Wolf Creek, but the parallels between the sadistic fictional serial killer and the real-life serial killers of Bradley Murdoch and Ivan Milat might just be enough to make us never want to go backpacking in Australia.